We're here. You're here. That's the most important part. This is The Empty Cup. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Rodney.
And I'm Keith. And we're the hosts of the More in Common podcast that have branched out into doing some corporate culture consulting. And as an extension of that, we decided to bring that content that we're building around compassion in the workplace to you via The Empty Cup.
Keith and I have worked in the corporate world for a long time. And a lot of times the corporate world gets talked about badly. And what we've come to realize is the problem isn't the work or the company. The problem is the culture. The problem is culture. And a lot of times, we have both experienced this. Our cups are just being drained. Our spirits are being drained. Our hopes, our dreams. And so we've designed this to give you some inspiration, some motivation, some tips, some usable tips on your journey as you're building a culture, as you're a part of a culture, to make it better.
So The Empty Cup, it's where we work with you around a culture of compassion by interviewing amazing people who are building a culture of themselves in various aspects of the entire corporate organization.
Why would you listen to The Empty Cup? If you are working somewhere and you've ever felt down, you've ever felt not heard, you've ever felt not seen, you've ever felt like there could be so much more. You love what you do, but there's just a little bit tugging at you, and you just want it to be the place where you want to go, where you love to go. Well, we're going to, like Keith said, we're going to be distilling some tips from some amazing people. We're going to help you get it there. We're going to help your leaders get it there. We're going to help you owners and CEOs. And we're going to make it an amazing journey. So join us.
And we're going to bring our kids with us from time to time. So enjoy it and send us your feedback. Like, and give us a follow. And we'll be putting these out. All right. On to this week's episode.
Here at More in Common, our mission is all about driving productive human connection through compassionate conversation.
And here's the thing. To hire the best talent requires understanding the talent you are selecting. Do you spend enough time connecting with your recruits to evaluate the talent that is going to best fit your culture? As we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, talent matters. And today, we're with the co-author of The Talent Wars, Mike Sarraille.
Mike, what's happening?
What's up, fellas? How you doing? Thanks for having me.
In today's Empty Cup, this is going to be about a talent mindset. So if you are in the HR world, if you're a leader, if you're an executive, if you're a manager, you're going to want to tune in. You're going to listen up because this is going to be for you. But before we do all that, I want to tell you a little bit about Mike. Mike is the CEO of EF Overwatch, an executive search and talent advisory firm and leadership consultant with Echelon Front. He's a former Recon Marine and retired U.S. Navy SEAL officer with 20 years of experience in special operations, including the Elite Joint Special Operations Command, and now author of The Talent War. So, and maybe some stuff on the horizon. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, we just learned a lot about you there, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Born and raised in the Bay Area of California. Enlisted in the Marine Corps, became a Recon Marine and Scout-Sniper. Had met some Navy SEALs. I'm like, hey, that's my next challenge. It was a higher pedigree of individual, and everyone sort of describes SEAL training as some of the toughest military training in the world. So I couldn't, in good conscience, not give it a shot. That would weigh on my soul because I'd always be asking, hey, could I have done that? And so that was pretty much really a driver, and then made it to a very let's just say specialized in selective command in the SEAL teams that only a very, very, very small percentage of SEALs make it to. And I was humbled by the fact that I was surrounded by some of the most amazing human beings in the world, and watching them conduct, selfless valor on a nightly basis was, I consider myself fortunate. But, I say all that is that each of those programs had what we call an assessment and selection program. And what assessment and selection to the business world is the hiring process. And these programs are sometimes 6 months to 2 years long. You could say they're the longest behavioral interview to get into the organization. They're watching everything that you do. Everything has a purpose. Every minute has a purpose. They're watching for something. And then eventually, guys, it's you got to leave the military at some point. And for me, it was entering the private sector. So I got my MBA. And then, what I was taught in the SEAL teams is to be disruptive, a disruptive thinker. And so I picked a industry to disrupt, which is executive search and recruiting. And I think George and I have been doing a pretty good job of that.
What made you pick executive search and recruiting? I got to ask.
It's because I have this fascination of how you build elite teams and how you select talent. And one of the things I know this about myself is I'm always sitting back watching people. And, it's very interesting because I was so mistaken on who I thought represented talent in the hiring process and who didn't. And guess what? I couldn't have been more wrong. And so, the special operations community is a believer in the talent mindset. It's the very essence and core of who we are as an organization. And we are an organization that sends small teams time and time again against a numerically superior force. And that smaller force of special operations soldiers comes out victorious almost every single time. How is that possible? And how could that be replicated in the business world? Because it can be replicated in the business world. Yet, what do most business leaders say? Oh, no, Mike, that might have worked in special operations. Wouldn't work here. You know what that is? That's a closed mindset. That's ego coming out when a business leader says that, hey, the way we do things was fine. We don't need to improve.
Status quo.
Exactly.
I know you have a good example of a time where you did make a wrong assessment of somebody, and can you recall that for us?
Well, thank you, Rodney, for bringing that up. Most embarrassingly, let's just put Mike on the spot.
That was great.
Let's put him on first.
So this is one of my many stories where I was wrong in life. If I wrote a book, it would be called "My Life is a Failure," or a series of repeat failures. So in my Buds class, there was a young Korean American from LA, and just totally unassuming. Here I'm a Recon Marine, already a sniper, now going through SEAL training, barrel chested. And I looked at this little guy and I'm like, oh yeah, he's not going to last a day or a few weeks. Let me now jump forward. This has now accomplished the following, all by the age of 34. Was awarded the Silver Star during the Battle of Ramadi for bravery above and beyond. Then the Navy sent him to get his undergraduate degree from the University of San Diego, where he majored in mathematics and got a 3.98, which I want to know why he didn't get a 4.0. I often have to tell him, hey, you're not perfect, or you would have gotten a 4.0. Well, after that, he got into Harvard Medical School, which I heard is a pretty decent medical school. Graduated from there, became a doctor. And then when NASA was accepting applications, I think 2 years ago, he applied 18,000 applicants. He was one of, I think, 12 selected, and now he's an astronaut. And his name is Dr. Johnny Kim, and he's one of the most humble, just dudes. I mean, you talk about there is no such thing as a perfect human, but this guy gets pretty damn close. Yeah.
That's a cool story. So the reason I just want to share, the reason I don't feel bad about throwing your story out there, we talked before, the reason we found you is our homie Derek. You were on his podcast. I've read the book, or I've listened to the book, and I'm going back and reading it. But humility is just such a common trait that I picked up off of you the first time we talked and in the conversations. And then you also talk about it as a leadership quality and as a thing that makes great leaders. So that's why I didn't feel like it was a big deal.
Can I ask? I need to ask a follow-up question on this. You've had these assessments where you've looked at people and just been like, yep, not going to make it, as you just described. Do you still catch yourself doing it today?
Oh, I think it's the natural bias that we fall into.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage that?
You train yourself in the biases. And we talked about this in the book, is if let's say you create a hiring staff, is you actually have to train them in all the different biases from what we call the halo effect group think, so that they can identify it in themselves or each other and say, hey, Keith, just throwing this out there, brother. I think you may be suffering from the halo effect because you both went to the same university and you like the guy. I think we need to look past those things. And once you identify those biases, you become a little better. And I hope there was no arrogance in the book where people are like, well, these guys think they have hiring figured out. We don't, dude. Yeah. We don't.
You talk about
still
it a lot.
Make mistakes.
Yeah.
To go back to humility, dude, the guys who were most lethal in the SEAL teams, most of them were at this command I talked about. And I would watch them, and they were they were quiet guys. They would go out and do what they had to do on the battlefield, and they were lethal. And then they'd come back and dial up their empathy, and they'd be extremely quiet, and they'd be well-rounded, and they didn't need to beat their chest. The guys in the SEAL teams that talked and beat their chest usually were the biggest cowards when the bullets flew. And, they just maybe didn't have the experiences to humble them. But when you've led guys on the battlefield and lost guys, that humbles you real quick. And it's a reinforcement that you don't have all the answers. And, combat has a way of mentoring, or we say combat is the ultimate mentor. Combat will humble you. For the business world, life will humble you. If you act with contempt and arrogance towards people, you may have a long ride, but life will eventually catch up to you. And life has a way of humbling everyone. So, I have an allergic reaction, as George says it. I guess I said it one time. It's almost an allergic reaction to arrogance in somebody who's not a team player. If I identify one of those things, one, I'm not going to hire you. No way. Nor do I ever want to hang out with you. None of my tribe, my social circle, are overly arrogant. They're not arrogant. Maybe they're prideful sometimes, but they're not arrogant, and they're usually extremely they're team oriented.
In that answer to that question, you said you study the biases, but then the thing you didn't say, but you intimated that you do, is give permission, or there is a cultural permission to call each other on it.
Rodney, you don't see this in the business world where you have a culture where people can call each other out with the intent of like, hey, I'm going to call you out on this because it was a huge mistake and I want you to learn from it in the off chance that you're not learning right now, and so we can get better individually and as an organization. So in the military, I'm not going to say the SEAL teams, in the military, we conduct something called an after action review, or a hot wash, or some people call it a debrief, after everything we do, whether it's training or if we actually go out on a mission. And what you will see in the SEAL teams is you will see somebody, if you did something wrong on the battlefield, Rodney, and you don't like call yourself out on it, somebody be like, hey, Rodney, I saw you enter that room by yourself. We don't clear rooms with one-man entries. We can't have that. And what we see is, when somebody calls you out, what do you get? You get defensive.
Yeah.
And you see two guys, go at it a little bit, but like 5 minutes later, they would come together, share a beer, and be like, "Hey, brother, I'm bringing that up because I don't want you to get hurt." Hey, I understand.
What you do see in the corporate world? It's interesting that it's called after action report, debrief, hot wash. I think was the other one.
Yes. What do they call it?
We call them postmortems, which is really interesting. It's like an overinflated sense of importance. Like, we just lost a sales deal. Nobody died. It is not a post-mortem. My first manager at my company, he called it out. He's like, we should not call this that. Like, nobody died. It makes the stakes so high that you can't make mistakes, and you can't talk about them when they happen because, oh my God, you caused this to die. And it's super unhealthy.
There's no zero defect mentality or zero defect culture in the military. We expect people to make mistakes. We actually embrace failure. We all know that we are going to push you to your limits during training, because when you are at your mental and physical limits, when you're outside your comfort zone, that's when true learning takes place. And that's where mistakes are going to happen. Now, if you learn from that mistake, you become stronger as a performer. That's a win in our book. Mistakes are even made on the battlefield, and we confront them and we learn from them. But like, there is this fear. Because we work with companies on the leadership consulting side through Echelon Front, which is Jocko Willink and Leif Babin's company. You guys probably have never heard of them. They wrote a book.
Never heard of them.
Never heard of them.
Ownership.
Never did a burpee in my life.
Okay. So in companies, you'll talk to the people and they're like, I'm afraid to raise my hand
Yeah.
and call somebody out
Yeah.
or admit my mistakes for fear that I will just get like handed my ass, so to speak.
So in that culture, there is the giving and then there's the receiving of that feedback. Do you hire people and look for traits in people that clearly are capable of receiving feedback, or do you teach people to do it? Because I think that is a big part of the formula as well.
It is. I'm going to say naturally we look for people who could sit here and tell me their weaknesses, their greatest opportunities or areas for growth. Hey, I've got a lot of, you can almost sense humility. Humility is very much correlated with somebody's ability to take feedback or to identify their shortcomings. It's the realization that we're all WIPs, works in progress, until the day we are we're 6 feet under. But you can turn somebody around who does not receive feedback well. You can coach and mentor.
It could be
and
a
train
learned
them.
trait.
It can. You just have to explain, hey, within this culture, you are going to get feedback. That is the only way you improve. That's why we're giving it. We want to see you, improve. We want to see the organization improve. You explain why you're giving them feedback. And then also, hey, when somebody's giving feedback, just keep your mouth shut. Listen to why they're explaining it, because they're entitled to their perspectives and you may learn something. But, if someone continually is that guy who is getting feedback, or that woman that's getting feedback and interrupts you as you're giving feedback, that's going to be problematic, and that needs to be addressed very, very, very early up front.
I think there's a lot of reasons in corporate culture as to why it happens. I think one of them is, Cynic talks about it a lot. It's reporting to the street, and it's the board of directors, and what comes down from that is a whole lot of unnatural and unhealthy things that just say we've got to be perfect and we've got to be the best, and the mechanisms used to get to being the best just aren't good. They just aren't what good, like great teams don't use the things that a lot of businesses use. So
you know what? Again, those tough guys in the special operations community who didn't see all that much combat, and maybe had one combat deployment, which is a lot, but they'd be talking a big game and how they ran things on the battlefield, and we'd be like, yeah, it was a perfect operation. We're like, what? I've never seen a perfect operation a day in my life. All I've seen is chaos. Every victory I've seen, and again, I have 10 combat deployments. There's dudes that were with me at this command that had 20 combat deployments, dude. I'm talking guys, I am so humbled to be associated with these guys. But, from all those experiences, no one will ever tell you they saw a good victory. Hey, combat is ugly. Yeah. It's how you dig through that ugliness, how you prioritize and execute to maneuver on your competition and win. But hey, Rodney, I'll say one last thing. This thing about culture. Do you guys know who Bill Campbell is? The $1 trillion coach, secret coach of Silicon Valley?
Yeah.
Okay. This guy was from Pennsylvania, coal mining town, grew up dirt poor, got into Columbia, played football at Columbia, and then was a coach in Columbia and at Boston College before he went to Kodak, and then eventually Apple. He ended up as the CEO of Intuit. And he had that coach mentality, and so Silicon Valley loved, because he was mentoring guys like Sergey Brin, Ben Horowitz. I mean, he was a mentor to Steve Jobs. He was a mentor to a lot of people. Well, I told you I was born and raised in the Bay Area in Palo Alto, and Bill Campbell, along with a guy named Matt Wilsey, helped me set up a trip where I brought 20 SEALs to Silicon Valley to meet with Sergey Brin, Mark Benioff, Larry Ellison. I mean, it was the A-list of leaders for 2 days. And Bill Campbell talked about a story where he felt the culture was getting so risk averse. And one of his SVPs put a lot of time and effort into a product rollout, and it didn't work out. But he mitigated his risk as best as possible. They just missed something when they took it to market. And everyone thought Bill was going to come in based off traditional corporate culture and just slam the dude and hold him accountable. And he did the opposite. He actually had him stand up and he applauded him. He's like, it's because of men like you, men and women like you, that you pushed the envelope, you accepted risk, that the organization, it didn't work out, but the organization is stronger from it. Now we know the market even better. And it said, as he was telling the story, he said, everyone just, their jaws dropped. is that he created this culture of rewarding failure, where it's saying it's okay to fail as long as you fail from, things just didn't work out. It wasn't because of laziness.
Yeah.
You're
still working hard.
Yeah. And things just don't work out sometimes. But as Bill was talking, we very, very much saw the culture that we created within the military, within what he was talking about. And so there was it was a leadership exchange between us and these Silicon Valley leaders. And there was a lot of the same practices.
I'm going to attempt to connect something. So I did not plan on talking about this, so I'm going to see if I can. It struck me as odd for a moment that there's a part in the book where you're talking about emotions, and you talk about, you mentioned it a minute ago, having high emotional intelligence or being able to have empathy and connect to it, and then turn it off, go be a soldier, and then come back and turn it back on. And there's a larger mental health conversation there, I think, for the general public. But I think as it relates to corporate America, many of them would say emotions don't have a place in work, or we shouldn't acknowledge how we feel about things. And I think that's why it struck me as I was like, oh, wait, this highly successful SEAL is talking about understanding the emotional impact of different things, and we ignore it at work often. Not to say that we should give in to them all the time. They're not always correct, but they're there is more the point I think I'm trying to make. And so I think that is a place where we in the corporate world miss out a lot. We're missing out on information. We're missing out on connection. And it just, you connecting that in the book was kind of a light bulb moment. And I think it would lead to healthy organizations. I'm curious to see, have you connected that piece to the culture conversations you have and the trainings that you do?
There's a lot of misnomers, a lot of ill-conceived, preconceived notions about special operations that were just these mindless sociopaths, and it couldn't be farther from the truth. At the end of the day, we're common men with an uncommon desire to push the envelope and become better human beings. That's what we're looking for in the training. But emotion is healthy. Now, emotion, in terms of being involved in solving a problem, is not going to be helpful. And that's where I'll get to this thing, this dimmer switch. So Rich Deviney is this Navy SEAL I served with. He has a book called The Attributes coming out, the 25 hidden drivers of optimal performance. This thing is good. And so he was one of the interviews in the book, and he described this so beautifully. He said, for special operations guys, it's almost like empathy had to be on a dimmer switch. We are high empathy guys. I'll cry with you, Rodney. If you lose a family member, I'll be there to cry with you and to empathize with you and to hold you. But he said, when we went on a mission, you learn to dial down that empathy to achieve mission success, to achieve victory, because you're going against some very dangerous people. And in order to accomplish the mission, sometimes you've got to do things that normal humans would be just traumatized to do. But guys were very good about coming back and then dialing that empathy back up. Now, you did hit on something that Rich is like, hey, this is a separate conversation as it pertains to mental health. You can only do that so much before your system becomes unbalanced a little bit. And that's where I think some of this post-traumatic stress comes into play, which post-traumatic stress is not a disorder. Actually, it was General Mattis that described this again beautifully. He said he considers he calls it post-traumatic growth. And he said basically that, the reactions of post-traumatic stress are a normal human reaction to the unnormal conditions of war. And when you think about that, that's so great. Now, if you as a person can step away from those traumatic environments, those traumatic experiences, and actually learn from it, then you've grown. You've used that post-traumatic stress, that growth, to grow as a human being, and that's what you ultimately want to achieve.
I'm just thinking about that. That's deep. The dimmer switch thing really resonates for me, and Keith actually got the idea at some point last year, but a lot of people ascribe the only emotion that a man can have as anger, and that's not really. We're not that one dimensional. We can.
Yeah, you hit something on that, is the difference between acknowledging the emotion and letting the emotion drive decisions.
You hit it. Emotions should never drive your decisions. Do they weigh into the decision-making process? Absolutely. But much like we described the biases, once you identify and understand potential biases going in, and you can better understand your emotions, you better understand that your emotions can take you in a very wrong direction. Keith, I love that. You described that beautifully.
We got some questions. We'll attempt to rapid fire this. It didn't go so well with George. We got into full on conversation, but that's fine. We're adults.
I will keep my answer short.
Okay.
I'm going into concentration mode.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
Can I go with the first one?
You can do it.
Can I start?
You can do
All
it.
right. Yeah. So the book is Talent Wars. Can the war actually be won?
No. It's not about the end state. It's about committing to the endless fight of not only finding your talent, but developing your talent. Mm-hmm. And if somebody new comes in the door, which, if your company's grown, it's doing the right thing, then you've basically started at square one. Mm-hmm. And that just never ends, man. The moment you stop investing and coaching and mentoring your people is when your organization will start to decline.
That's beautiful. Number 2, how do you identify a quality practitioner to access and select talent?
So you're going to select a hiring manager. You're going to take one of your best performers who embodies what you're looking for in the very hire that they're going to make. If that hiring manager, that practitioner, does not have the qualities that you want, then they're going to hire somebody of a lesser quality than them, and you're going to end up with crap. So within the special operations community, we put our very best in charge of assessment and selection for a reason. One, not only are they men and women that the young candidates look up to, and they're like, wow, I want to be that person. They inspire, but they also understand and have the humility to put their egos aside. Keith's an 18-year-old young man. That kid has all the attributes, all the qualities, the mindset, the character to be better than I am in 5 years. We need to get that guy into the organization.
So I'm hearing you say that recruiting, hiring, that's not an unimportant thing. Like they should be there as well.
Guys, if you stay in the military long enough, you are going to rotate into a training role. There's a reason for that. Is that when you start to train others, you actually start to comprehend the things that you were doing on the battlefield. When you have to teach somebody else, you're actually engaging in deliberate practice, and you start to really understand the procedures that you've been doing. Guys, there was times I just memorized procedures. I go up to a door, I do this, but I didn't comprehend all behind it. It became repetition.
Yeah.
But when you have to describe something, it's almost like leadership. Tell us about your leadership style. I could ask that to an O10, a general or an admiral, and they will give you a 20-minute answer, which is not acceptable in an interview. But it's become muscle memory to them. Leadership has become muscle memory.
Yeah.
And they can't articulate it. It's the same thing. That's why we put people into a training role. When you put a leader into a training role, they will come back enhanced. They'll be optimized. They will be a better leader. That's just the bottom line. Salespeople, you need to, you look at the book Range by David Epstein, you need to expose them to more. And when you move from being a top salesman on the in your territory to then being in charge of hiring, you're going to have to, one, elevate a few different skills, and that makes you stronger as a leader.
The mentality, and you talk about this in the book, you've mentioned ego a couple of times or alluded to it, that idea of hiring to be better than me. It is this interesting dissonance since I read that. There might be a few parents, we might be able to name some, But overall, when we have kids, we want our kids to have better than we had. So we do everything that we do to give them opportunities to be better than we are. Yet in the working world, we don't have that mentality. We just have fill the role and I want to protect my space. And I like that. That's a huge focus of your selection criteria, especially in special ops.
You know, I sat down with a Vietnam era SEAL who were the dudes that books were written about his era that really invigorated a lot of us to join the SEAL teams. And at the time, I didn't truly appreciate it. I thought it was just, blowing smoke my direction, but he's like, you guys are better than us. And he meant it, though. He meant it. And now I understand as I'm out and I look at the younger generation, and Keith, you're in Ohio, right?
Yes.
I just spoke to the Ohio State University Naval ROTC. I think there was about 100 of the young
Awesome.
young leaders who are going to become officers in the Navy and the Marine Corps. And I told him that story, and I'm like, I get what he meant now. That's the whole legacy of our leadership, is to make the next generation better. Hey, I understand it with your kids. That's your parent intuition to try to create a better condition for them. Why wouldn't it be the same for your organization? There's a total lack of loyalty towards companies in the private sector. And, when people are fired from jobs, maybe they've been there for 15 years and they're let go, they don't always take the time to look in the mirror and say, why was I let go? Loyalty is a two-way street. The organization does have to be loyal to its people. You have to take care of your people. You got to hold them accountable. But when you stop performing and contributing to the mission, you're actually being disloyal to your organization. And a lot of people can't embrace that. They can't take ownership that they are starting to become complacent.
That's good.
Well, that leads right into the next one. What is a talent mindset?
A talent mindset is the deep foundational belief that the most strategic competitive advantage your organization can ever achieve is human capital, humans, people. People commercialize. People take products to market or services to market. They commercialize them, not your technology, not your systems. Special operations has 5 truths, and each of those 5 truths revolves around people. People, not your hardware, your technology, are your most important asset. Quality over quantity. Those are the type of things that if you make that the hallmark, the foundation of your organization, that, hey, if we hire the best people, if we train them better than our competition, then all the other problems will be solved and all the opportunities will be seized, or at least to a higher degree. That's it. But God, CEOs miss that. And I get it, because they're so fixated on the revenue generating functions within corporations that they miss the fact that before you have salespeople, you have this hiring process over here, and it needs to be as good as your competition, if not better.
Man, that's so next question. Do you think talent can do any role?
Oh, I do think, again, I go back to David Epstein's book, which was recommended to me by a exec from Heidrick and Struggle, who's a mentor of mine. And generalists rule the world. Can talent do any role? Can I step in and become a optometrist? No, I can't. I don't have those technical abilities. Could I lead a group of optometrists? Yes. So if for general management, yes, I do believe talent can step into any role. Now, are people best suited for specific functions and roles? Absolutely. And you better assess their attributes and the attributes required by that function or that job. That's part of the process. But I watched some amazing special operations guys, SEALs, Green Berets, MARSOC guys, step from being in charge of people on the battlefield to all of a sudden they're in charge of acquisition and procurement, for which they have no core skills, and they crush it. They blow it out of the water. Or I've seen guys taken from the SEAL teams and be put in charge of a ship. And guys, SEALs don't drive ships. That's not a core skill. That's nowhere in the training. And all of a sudden, they're more effective than the surface warfare officers from the Navy. It's this mentality. It's the character. It's the humility. It's the mindset. The humility to say, hey, I have no freaking idea or any clue what I'm doing right now, but I've got a great group of people around me. We can figure this out together and actually move the football forward so that the organization is that much closer to winning.
So in a different hiring talent, you may be hiring for a role, but you're hiring an individual that can lead your business however you need it to be led, because they're going to learn and take the time and build the skill set to do that particular thing.
I would rather have an organization of Swiss Army knives.
Yeah.
I'd rather have 20 Swiss Army knives than 20 scalpels. Utility players. I mean, they call it general management for a reason, because you could be in marketing for 1-2 year stint, and then they look at you and say, hey, Keith, we need you to go take the chief people officer role. We need you to really hone in on talent and the talent management piece. And with good leaders, they can do that. Tracy Keogh is a perfect example. The CHRO at HP. This is the woman that went and found Meg Whitman. Harvard-educated, MBA, cut her teeth in marketing and sales, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, we need you to go with a different organization before HP. We need you to go take charge of HR, which her first answer was no. And they're like, great, you got the job. We have faith in you. And she stepped in, and she loved it, and she crushed it to the point where she's the second highest paid CHRO in the world now. Yes, based off my experience, these people that are generalists that have exposed themselves to so much have this breadth of experience. They draw from this wide base, which equips them to pretty much solve a multitude of problems based off somebody who's so specialized that if a problem is within that specialty, they're armed to solve it. But you take them outside of that specialty, and you'll see them start to flail.
That leads to the next question nicely. Do you think passion matters?
Yeah, I do. And so when you say passion, I think drive. I don't know if you guys.
I had a feeling you were going to ask. You take it that way. Yeah. That's
okay.
Good.
So, I was passionate about being a SEAL. When I got out, first off, 5 years, no. I'll say 6 years ago when I was a SEAL, leading guys in combat, if somebody said, hey, you're going to be in HR in 6 years.
Why would I go to HR?
You basically just said I was screwed up. And so, it is an identity crisis when you get out of the military, especially 20 years. I mean, that is part of your DNA. Yeah. And during the MBA program, it was more of a process of elimination. When I finally I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go disrupt recruiting and executive search over here. It wasn't like I was passionate about it. It was a realization of, hey, I've got to find an occupation. Like my vocation can be something else. My vocation can be on my off time, but I got to go find an occupation. I do believe that you can create passion by becoming so freaking good at something that you're indispensable to an organization. And so there's, my passion for this, guys, derives from two things. One, I see clients, small to mid-sized businesses that have no clue how to hire, and that's not their fault because they're focused on their specialty in designing a product or doing their service, where I can help them. Because I know that small to mid-sized businesses are the backbone of America. That may sound cheesy, but I fundamentally believe that the economy is the greatest strength, the greatest power in this nation, not the U.S. military. And if the economy is strong, guess what's strong? The U.S. military has everything they need. The second is I served with these amazing men and women coming out of the military who struggle to find a company that values what they bring to the table, leadership. And so, I pair those two, and I get a lot of emotional ROI from it. And now it's become my passion. But when I started this, I'd sit there. I'm like, hey, this is not leading SEALs. This sort of sucks, but you just grind it out. But drive, you're going to hire somebody. You don't hire somebody without drive, which is the just unrelenting pursuit of improvement, self-improvement, organizational improvement. They've got to be relentless. And if they're relentless, the passion will come with it. Drive is much more amenable to control than passion.
This probably won't stay in here, but what you did is such a small thing that gets missed. He could have meant it definition A, 1A, and you could have meant definition 1B. And if it's never clarified, then we're talking about different things. Yeah. And human communication breaks down right away at that point. Next question. Isn't industry experience the thing? Isn't that the most important thing when you're hiring somebody?
Here's where a community proves this wrong. Can we agree that businesses are fascinated with special operations? And they always want to know how they conduct business, how they build their teams, what are the practices they use for the day-to-day operations, how they set strategy, what are the tactics they utilize to achieve that strategy. They're fascinated, and for good reason. Well, guess what? Special operations doesn't hire for industry experience because that does not exist. And if that does not exist, I, as a special operations guy, could say, well, talent doesn't exist for us. No, talent is everywhere. And it's where you least expect it. It's black, it's white, it's poor, it's rich, it's LGBT, it's straight. You don't know where you're going to find talent. So special operations had to become very good at something called attribute, or you could call it potential-based hiring. And that's if we can identify the attributes that make this great special operations guy who's been here for 20 years the same attributes, then we know there is a high probability that that individual is going to make a great special operator. Now, experience, let's remove the industry part from it. Experience is not a great predictor, and data will show this, of success, of future success. Now, Rodney, you could be in an organization, let's say you're coming from Google, and you rock at Google. You're doing great, but then all of a sudden, Apple's like, hey, let's pluck Rodney and get him into Apple. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, he's got 10 years of experience within a specific domain. You get to Apple and you're not an A player, and you're not performing to the level they were expected. There's a lot of variables where you and Google, maybe you had great leaders, you had great mentors, it was a different support mechanism. The culture maybe aligned more with your values than it did at Apple. And time and time again, we see people hired based off industry experience. They make that their primary concern, and it bites them in the, you know what? Let me finish with this. Experience is where you've been. And while that's important, because experience, when I think experience, I think scars, I think life lessons that either develop you into a stronger person or have made you develop into sort of a victim mentality. So experience tells you where somebody's been. And we're not discounting that, but character and mindset tell you where somebody's going. And people default to industry experience. It's actually the normal default mode in human beings is lazy, the path of least resistance. Well, if I pluck Rodney from Google, one of my competitors, which they're competitors in different ways, if I pluck him, I won't have to put any time into training him. I can just plug him into Apple and he'll perform. It doesn't work that way. You said it earlier. Can the talent war be won? No. It's the commitment to fighting that continual war. Even if you take somebody who has 20 years in a different company, guess what? And come into your organization, you're coaching and mentoring them as well, even if they're a 45-year-old man or woman.
So you said talent's black, it's white, it's LGBTQ, it's straight, it's South Asian, it's East Asian, it's all over the place. And you also said we're default to lazy, which is also the answer to why my environment isn't as diverse as I want it to be, because I'm lazy and not, I want to go with the easiest plan or the easiest path I understand. How do you recruit for the best talent? What's your recommendation on recruiting talent?
If you truly, I'll take this a different direction. If you truly want to become good at recruiting or finding talent, then you need to become a talent magnet. If you're having to go look for the talent, you've missed the point. One, a lot of organizations don't do a good job of telling their story, especially the story of the people that make up that organization and why those people are so passionate about working for that company. And if you market, so they're so concerned about marketing the customer value proposition to the customer that they completely miss the EVP, the employee value proposition. Guys, special operations didn't start out as a magnet, but it is a talent magnet now. Now, do they have the luxury of Hollywood and these books? Absolutely. But look at organizations.
That's part of it.
Look at Google. What computer engineer doesn't want to get out and at least get their application into Google? Google has become a talent magnet. Google also spends estimated 2 to 3 times their competitors on talent. They understand it. Or McKinsey. If you are studying, getting your MBA and you want to go into consulting, you are trying to get the grades and build the experience during that MBA to be able to be considered by McKinsey. And when people leave McKinsey or leave Google, guess what? They still identify with it. Oh, I'm a former Googler. Or even a CEO who bought a company. He'll say, yeah, actually, I started out at McKinsey. He'll throw that in somewhere, or she'll throw that in. Or how about, I'm a former Marine. When you start to become a talent magnet, the right people start to find you. And you're not limited to Indeed or LinkedIn or Monster. But I would say this: stop thinking that talent can only be found in one spot. Well, we go and recruit from the Ivy Leagues. Wow, you're limiting yourself to so many great people coming out of those public schools or those public universities, state universities. You're missing so much talent. You're basically saying, hey, well, people coming out of these Ivy League universities are, they have a high level of intellect. There's different forms of intellect, and we talked about it in the book. There is high IQ, but there's also something called effective intelligence, and we'll always take effective intelligence, the ability to think critically and solve problems for which no book solution exists. That's much more valuable than somebody that has a high pedigree degree but suffers from paralysis through analysis. So one, you need to become a talent magnet, which starts with telling the story of your organization, showing the employees who love working there, and slowly building that. That does not happen overnight. And can a local business do that? Yes, you can become a talent magnet by telling the story of your organization to that small town of 5,000. Look at Chick-fil-A. Their representatives are what? Where are they in their education? High school. And those kids don't have industry experience, but Chick-fil-A hires for attributes. They're looking for the potential and who would make a great representative and maybe stay within that organization after college. And Chick-fil-A, you go there, the service is pretty top notch. Same with like In-N-Out. Now I want a hamburger.
I want to wrap it. I want to wrap it with this. What are like your top 2 or 3 things to leave people to think about, or tips to get them around to understanding a talent mindset?
One, I'll say talent doesn't look like you or me. Again, we said it. It's black, it's white, it's rich, it's poor. It comes from different demographic. It's straight, it's LGBTQ. And second, 2 things, especially for the business. One, if your HR is not treated as a strategic function, as one of the most valuable functions in the organization, that's an indication that you don't have a talent mindset. HR should be in every meeting. And guys, I know we didn't talk about it here, but if data shows that CHROs make 3 times less than their C-suite counterparts, if that doesn't de-emphasize the importance of HR, I don't know what is. And usually it's a tactical function. It's not viewed as a strategic function. You have to look at HR indirectly. Yes, it's a cost center, but if you can look at it indirectly, you will see that it is the function that feeds every revenue generating function within your organization. That is strategically important.
If HR is a strategic function in of itself, by hiring top talent, you are a revenue generating machine.
Yes. And that goes back to why we put some of our highest performing individuals into the hiring process to create an exponential effect for the organization. Yeah, hey, you take that top salesperson, you explain to them that, hey, we're going to put you in charge of hiring, and here's why. Because if you hire 10 more of you, this company just grew tenfold. Yeah. That's what we need you doing. This, selling is strategically important. I could even argue that this is more strategically important. This role you're going to have for a year to build the sales force is even more important than what you were doing. And we're going to reimburse you the same as if you were making those sales. And I know that's tough for a lot of organizations to do.
It's tough, but then, like you say, if you shift and you understand that this is the engine, everything else is the car.
It's the long game.
Yeah, it's the long game.
It's strategic mindset.
I'll add what you said about the EVP, the employee value proposition, because that blew my mind when I read, and I was like, Keith, we need a Bushido. We need a code because it's like, you don't, like, we have a mission and we have a cause, but like, that's not what you sell to like why you work here.
Your people first, your environment, and then your product. Yes, Adam Smith. Thank you. That was his whole principle. And if your people feel like they belong there, they're going to drive and bring the best value. And people don't bring their best because it's like, I have a job, and and if you have a talent mindset, then I love that the whole mindset isn't just about selecting. It's developing, training, building, and giving to them, not just looking for them to give to you because you are the company.
What I found a lot of people have lost sight of is your job, if you're hired by a company, is to provide value above and beyond what you're paid. That's the whole goal. And if you can do that with a good attitude, guess what? You have something called job security.
Yeah.
And if you continue to do that, you will continue to accelerate within that organization. I don't know why a lot of people have lost sight of that. I mean, that's always been my goal when I move up to another leadership billet within the SEAL teams, is to outperform the expectations. And that's how you, again, secure job security and acceleration and autonomy and growth within your life.
Last question. How many burpees a day do you do?
I don't do burpees. I like to get in the gym and put up some weights. I love to jack some steel. At the end of the day, I went through multiple selection programs. Most SEALs are like, yeah, hey, I'm a SEAL. I'm like, yeah, you went through one selection program, but I did that like 3 times. But I can't do burpees now. Trust me, I've done more burpees than most military people, haven't gone through all the selection programs. But I've got a hip replacement on December 22nd. That's just the product of going through all those selection processes, 10 combat deployments, and then a couple hundred Skyfall.
We did ask George. We were like, George, how at your age, like how do you stay in that shape at your age? And he was like, oh, well, I work out next to an animal, so that helps.
I see George. George is my brother, man. Even though I won't want to talk to anyone in the morning when I get to the gym, I just want to work out. Like that's my church. And he'll be there. He'll be there at 4:30 when I walk in. I'm like, right on, man. I have a lot of admiration for his dedication at his age. What is he, 65?
54.
65. Okay.
No, 64. Is it 64? 65?
64.
I thought he was in
He's
50.
He's
You're
He's
8
50.
years, or how many years younger than him?
I'm 20 years. Younger.
Do the math, man. Really appreciate you making you both very generous with your time and your answers, and just thank you. Like this is goodness, and hopefully it'll help some people.
We'd love to work with you guys in the future. Dude, we have a great, I've assembled a cast of leaders through this thing called the Talent War Group. Yeah. And if you have a chance, go to thetalentwar.com. If you want to interview, talk to any of those people. I mean, you've got like Lisa Jaster, the 3rd woman in the history of the Army to graduate Ranger School. She is a hoss. And you talk about a leader, like she is good. Or Robin Fortner, a black Marine, 30 years, Sergeant Major. I mean, a woman that broke ceilings. Sergeant Major is the most senior rank. They're viewed as like senior enlisted advisors, the people that have most of the answers. I mean, we've got a great cast of amazing leaders, man. If you want any of them, contact us.
That's so. Thank you for that. We will also be reaching out to both of you for our actual podcast. Our podcast is a little bit more personal. It's like getting to know you and maybe some of those stories and like all that kind of stuff. And you're growing up in the Bay. You're a Niners fan?
Oh yes. They've been letting me down quite a bit.
Me and you, my man. George rubbed in his Kansas City win, and he told me I could commiserate with you. So at least I got that.
He was victorious. I was that was a big letdown, that Super Bowl.
That was you got to finish, right? That was a real big letdown.